Hey everybody, now that we understand some of the basics about the idea of federalism for your notes and reading, let's get into two details about federalism and how the national government utilized the idea of federalism to impose policy and kind of impact laws, that kind of stuff. So we're working on mandates and grants in this little short video here, and hopefully you'll be able to understand those two topics while we're done, and we can apply those later on in class. So remember a supremacy clause in Article 6 of the Constitution as you guys make your constitutional boxes. That the Constitution and laws of the U.S. shall be essentially the supreme law of the land, and they should go above the state laws. So you have to make sure you follow the federal laws when a state law and a federal law conflict. And so essentially the only national government is supreme, right, over any kind of state to summarize it down. And then in a way, the national government is in charge of all 50 states to a degree on one interpretation of that. And there's a big debate about who should have the power. We've seen this debate throughout history, the question of who is more powerful, if you will. Is it the national government or the states? We see this in ideology with who should do most of the lawmaking. Should it be the federal government or should it be the states? And it kind of lays down that kind of the struggle for power, if you will, of who can actually make decisions. And so we talk about, a federal government being a strong social government is a unitarian type government where you have one unit of government or one piece of government that's kind of like the main person in charge, the main man. And remember, our lawmaking process here is that when, a federal government passes a law going from the legislative to the judicial to the executive, and then, making sure that it's a constitutional law, it must be obeyed by all 50 states. And so the big question is how can states like national government decide a lot of times state issues? A lot of these issues that they're talking about are not in Article 1, Section 8 of the Constitution. Things like gun laws, environmental laws, and drinking age, and all that kind of stuff isn't really in the Article 1, Section 8. And so that's where we look at the idea of mandates and grants. So a great example here is the United States of America. Notice this little cartoon here has no S on it, right? Okay, and it's one little star. We'll look at a lot of political cartoons as we go here of ways that the United States has forced morality, right, on the states. So the marijuana criminalization, making marijuana a crime, which in a lot of our states did in 1970. The 21-year-old drinking age in 1984, which is 36 years ago. The idea of using abstinence-only education for sex ed, that was a requirement in 1996. Lowering the DUI rate to 0.08 in 2003. And doing all the different things that were national ideas, but we're actually we're technically state issues in terms of like what the laws is constitutionally. And so this is done through mandates. So a mandate is simply a requirement for state and local governments to comply with national law. So let's say, when, for example, when the national government made tobacco age 21, they're probably going to put mandates in place for the state governments to comply with that national law. All right. If states do not comply with a mandate, then they're going to lose penalties. They either face penalties or lose money from federal grants. So, for example, when they did the CARES Act earlier this year or last year for the pandemic relief, one of the things they said was that if you're not a mask mandate state, you lose federal aid, which is one of the reasons why Wisconsin has so far has chosen not to overturn the mask mandate. Is that if they would lose, if Wisconsin would choose to overturn its mask mandate, we would then be penalized by losing $50 million in grant money. And it's kind of one of those mandate things that are put there. States love federal aid, local governments love federal aid, school districts love federal aid. And so that's kind of where this federal aid helps pay for all these programs in the state and local government. It kind of takes off their pressure. So things like the ADA, American Disabilities Act, you have to make sure that things, buildings, that kind of stuff are handicap accessible. And that, that includes not only federal buildings, but also state, local buildings, all that kind of stuff. The Clean Water and Air Act is a national thing, but is helped at the state level by the DNR. They help enforce all this kind of stuff. The Brady Bill, which was require background checks. And that also is a part of that requires to make sure that people are doing that kind of stuff. These are all different examples of these mandates. No Child Behind was a mandate that hit me. Basically, that federal government had to require states to have high standards and assessments like the ACT, like all kinds of stuff to determine student achievement. And if you don't have that test in there, and for you guys that were seniors or are juniors, are taking the ACT, if you don't have that test, don't require that testing, then you lose money for education. I call this little dude just staring at the camera here, kind of creepy. Like, anyway, the drinking age is one that Bill, a lot of people do junior year for American government. Is that it should be 21 or 18, and so it was a mandate that you have your drinking age at 21. Otherwise, you lose the grant money. You're penalized grant money for roads and highways. Some of these mandates are called unfunded mandates, where basically the government's not going to pay for anything, right? Those are, or first ones are mandates that are put in place so that the government will pay for. There's some that are unfunded mandates. The ADA, for example, is an unfunded mandate. You just lose money, right? You don't actually you just get kind of penalized for that kind of stuff. There's some underfunded mandates too that are out there. Things like, and these are underfunded when basically government pays for some of it, but not enough of it. Medicaid, Medicare is a great example of that. So Medicaid is healthcare for those in poverty, and so there's federal Medicaid money and state Medicaid money, and there's not enough federal Medicaid money to go around, so the state has to kick in a bunch and kind of help pay for that kind of thing. So those are mandates. That's one side of this whole thing, as the bell goes off the background. Here are grants. So grants are the other side of this whole deal. So grants are going to be, once again, remember, states love federal aid, and grants are more kind of like the bribery, the carrot and stick method I mentioned in my last video. Mandates like, you have to do this, right? That's what mandate is. Grants are like, come on, you want to do this kind of thing. And so essentially here, it's the national government using, their money and bribing states, if you will, kind of forcing them to do what they want to do. It's that carrot and stick method for my creepy little dude right here. That's doing the kind of stuff. So we nickname this fiscal federalism. The idea that they can share the costs on a project or help fund a project for the states, get them to do what they want to do. And so they're called grants and aid, federal funds from the national government to the states to make things happen. A lot of times they're done what's called block grants. So essentially, the national government gives these big block grants to the states. Say, okay, here's an environmental block grant or a law enforcement block grant. Essentially, here's a butt ton of money. You can use it as long as it's in this category of stuff. There's education block grants, that kind of thing. And so it's kind of a general, almost like a blank check, as long as you use it for one topic. If that kind of makes sense, right? You have category grants that are more specific, right? Here you got to tell you how you spend the money. So maybe it's on food stamps or Medicaid or Head Start, that kind of thing. So for example, with the CARES Act, brought that topic up earlier this week, there was a category grant for food stamps within the CARES Act. So the state got $50 million for food stamp money. And the mandate was, if you had that mask mandate, then you would lose that part of money for it. That's kind of where it comes in that way, okay? There's also project grants, so given for certain things. So university gets this for research and that kind of stuff. And so you can request grants from the government at research universities like UW-Madison, and they can then do research on different topics. And so if you ever want to go to medical research, scientific research, that kind of thing, project grants are a huge deal there. And so if they get awarded to do certain grants about different stuff, right now there are grants being awarded as part of some of the COVID-19 policies to research vaccines, research new strains, and that's all project grants given to colleges that way. A lot of times, different grants are given by formulas, and so the idea of formulas is that they kind of figure out how much money you get based off what kind of stuff you're doing, how many people you have, that kind of thing is where that part comes into for the formula grants. Please have a basic understanding, guys, of grants and mandates. We're going to be utilizing this stuff. We talk about federalism in class. Thank you for your time and your attention. You all are awesome, and don't forget that.